Welcome to today's historical deep dive, where we explore how a single brutal decision can echo through eternity. You think you know the story of Napoleon? Think again. History isn't just dates and battles. It's the smell of fear, the calculation in a commander's eye, the moment everything pivots. If you love immersive, real storytelling about ambition and downfall, hit like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. Drop a comment with your favorite Napoleon quote or the moment that shocked you most. Let's begin and change the way you think about history. You stand on the damp cobblestones of Paris. October 5th, 1795. The air is thick with the scent of impending chaos, a mix of autumn rain, frightened crowds, and the metallic tang of desperation. Royalist mobs, tens of thousands strong, surge towards the Tuileries Palace, threatening to drown the fragile young republic in blood. The National Convention huddles inside, paralyzed by fear, debating surrender or flight. This isn't a battle, it's a city choking on its own fear. A government frozen at the brink of oblivion. Suddenly, a young, relatively unknown general steps forward. He is lean, intense, with eyes that seem to burn with an unnatural certainty. His name is Napoleon Bonaparte. While others hesitate, seeing insurmountable odds, seeing a tidal wave of human fury about to break upon them, he sees not chaos, but a problem solvable with mathematics and audacity. He needs cannons, fast. This isn't a moment for political maneuvering. It's logistics under fire, a race against time itself. He dispatches a young cavalry officer, Joachim Murat, on a desperate ride through the volatile streets to seize artillery pieces miles away. Murat rides like the wind, a single figure tearing through the city's paralysis, a human arrow aimed at salvation. Hours later, as the first rioters reach the convention's defenses, the cannons arrive, hauled into position just moments before the wave crashes. There is no time for elaborate plans, no room for doubt or second-guessing. The order is given, sharp and final. Fire. The whiff of grapeshot tears through the insurgent ranks. It is brutal, terrifyingly effective. A storm of iron ripping through flesh and bone, and over in minutes. The mob breaks, scatters, their rebellion crushed not by negotiation or defense, but by cold, calculated force delivered with blistering speed. This wasn't just a victory. It was a clinical application of physics against flesh, a geometric solution applied to a human problem. This moment isn't just a historical footnote, it's a genesis. It's the first public display of the principle that will define his entire life, from this Parisian street to the plains of Austerlitz. Solve seemingly impossible problems with decisive, overwhelming force, delivered with absolute speed. While others saw chaos, he saw vectors, trajectory, and applied velocity. This isn't merely military tactics, it's a life philosophy born in the crucible of crisis. The insight here is profound, almost terrifying. When faced with paralysis, the fastest decisive action, however brutal, can instantly reshape reality. It poses a chilling question for you, standing here in history, smelling the faint gunpowder smoke. Does the speed of action justify the ruthlessness? Does crushing dissent with overwhelming force truly lay the foundation for lasting order? Or does it merely postpone a larger, more terrible reckoning? For Napoleon Bonaparte, on October 5th, 1795, it simply, undeniably, laid the foundation for his impossible rise. The grapeshot screams, tearing through the crisp Paris air. It's 13 Vendémiaire, year 4 of the Republic. You stand beside him, a once unemployed, restless artillery officer on half-pay, gazing upon the chaos. Moments ago, he was just Bonaparte, another face lost in the revolutionary churn. Now he is the man who saved the National Convention, the savior of the Republic. The swift change is dizzying. From the fringes of power, he is suddenly thrust into its very heart. His reward? Command of the Army of Italy. On the surface, it looks like a political exile, a backwater command overseeing a collection of ragged, unpaid soldiers, disillusioned by years of hardship. Most men would see a forgotten frontier, a place to endure. Napoleon, however, sees a chessboard. The pieces are scattered, demoralized, but the board itself offers opportunities no one else seems to grasp. He arrives not with carts laden with supplies or fresh regiments marching smartly, but with something far more potent: infectious energy and a promise of glory. He doesn't speak of holding the line, of weary defense. He speaks of conquest, of rich plains across the Alps, of making their names immortal. He looks into the eyes of despair and galvanizes it into daring. He takes men ready to mutiny and makes them believe they can conquer kingdoms. His weapon is speed, not just tactical speed on the battlefield, but psychological speed, an overwhelming velocity that shatters the enemy's will before the first major battle is even won. He moves his army faster than anyone thought possible. A blur of blue coats and bayonets, striking the Austrian and Sardinian forces before they can possibly unite. He violates every established military doctrine of the age, splitting his forces, operating without secure supply lines, forcing battles on his terms. And it works. Miraculously, bloodily, it works. Here is the profound insight that cuts through the noise. Fortune didn't just favor Napoleon in Italy. He forced fortune's hand. He didn't stumble into victory. He seized it through relentless, almost fanatical preparation married to astonishing speed of execution. While his opponents dined and debated, he was hunched over maps, studying terrain, calculating distances, understanding the ground better than the men who lived there. His mind didn't just process information. It worked at a different pace, synthesizing data, assessing risks, and formulating plans with breathtaking rapidity. This is the second, crucial layer of his principle. Speed isn't merely raw velocity, a headlong rush into the unknown. It is informed velocity, backed by intense study, deep knowledge, and meticulous planning. His daring actions weren't reckless impulses. They were rapid, confident decisions, built upon a foundation of exhaustive readiness. He taught his army to march on its stomach, to live off the land, discarding the ponderous, slow-moving baggage trains and traditional supply lines that chained other armies. This was another form of increasing velocity, shedding unnecessary burdens to move faster, strike harder, and disappear before the enemy could react. Your own ambition, perhaps, can gain similar speed by identifying and shedding its own unnecessary weights, by knowing your terrain intimately before you race across it. What would you discard to increase your pace? You march with the Army of Italy, a ragged, underfed force thrown against the established powers of Austria and her allies. The boots are worn thin, the rations meager, sometimes non-existent, yet the pace is brutal. Days blur into relentless forced marches, nights into brief, exhausted sleeps on the cold ground. You cross rivers thought impassable, scale mountains considered secure, pushing the limits of human endurance. Napoleon is everywhere, a whirlwind of energy. You see him by flickering candlelight, bent over maps, planning routes, calculating movements. Then, in the chaos of battle, he appears at the front, seemingly from nowhere, to personally direct a critical charge or rally faltering troops. Battles are won not just by courage, though there is plenty of that, but by his uncanny ability to concentrate force faster than anyone thought possible at the critical point. He doesn't fight the enemy's entire army head-on. He breaks it into smaller pieces, using speed and maneuver to isolate segments, and then destroys them sequentially before the main body can react. Lodi, Arpoli, Rivoli, these aren't just names on a map or dates in a history book. They are monuments built from the bones of empires, testament to the power of relentless aggression and operational speed. His opponents, steeped in the predictable, slow-moving dogma of 18th-century warfare, are like ponderous chess pieces against a player moving 5 steps ahead. They simply cannot keep up with this new, terrifying tempo of war. But the cost is steep, etched in the gaunt faces of the soldiers. The most dramatic scene, the one that embodies this brutal velocity, unfolds at the bridge of Arcole. For days, the army struggles to cross a narrow bridge under heavy fire, trapped in a deadly stalemate. French attacks falter, repulsed with heavy losses. Frustration mounts. Suddenly, Napoleon, snatching a tricolor flag from a fallen standard-bearer, personally leads a charge across the bridge. You see him, exposed, running into the maelstrom of bullets. Though the charge fails and he is pulled into a ditch, narrowly avoiding capture or death, the moment is electric. His willingness to put himself at the point of maximum danger, embodying the very speed and audacity he demands from his men, electrifies the troops. The insight is seared into your mind, etched in sweat and blood. Speed doesn't just move soldiers. It generates momentum, disorients the enemy's mind, and multiplies the effect of your force through sheer surprise and shock. Yet you look at the men around you, their bodies worn down, their spirits tested daily by this relentless pace. This pursuit of victory at maximum velocity, this constant state of forced march and battle, is it sustainable in the long run? Or does this brutal speed, which wins every battle today, build an unseen exhaustion, a brittle failure waiting to happen in the years to come? From the muddy plains of Italy, you turn your gaze eastward. The scent of dust and ambition fills your mind, pulling you toward horizons unknown. Egypt, not just a land of pharaohs and ancient dust, but a strategic fulcrum. Disrupt British trade to India. Follow in the footsteps of Alexander the Great, forging an empire where others saw only sand. The decision to launch this expedition is breathtakingly swift, almost reckless. Bypassing conventional strategic wisdom that screamed caution, it is a gamble against the known world, driven purely by the velocity of your will. You land, and the dry heat presses down. Before you rise the pyramids, immense, indifferent, ancient giants, witnessing yet another wave of fleeting human drama. Their silence is a stark contrast to the frantic energy of your army, buzzing with expectation and the thrill of the foreign. Then comes the Battle of the Pyramids. Against the legendary Mamluk cavalry, renowned for their ferocity, your troops form squares, disciplined, impenetrable blocks of muskets and bayonets. It is a geometric solution to a chaotic problem, a tactical masterpiece. The Mamluks charge, swirling like a sandstorm, but they break against the unyielding lines. It is a swift, decisive victory, another testament to the power of disciplined infantry and your principle of applied speed. Velocity, it seems, works even on ancient sands, against ancient foes. Yet the universe has a brutal sense of irony. While you consolidate your initial gains ashore, believing the land is the only chessboard that matters, a different kind of speed is at play. At Aboukir Bay, the British fleet under Horatio Nelson moves with naval velocity, guided by intelligence, patience, and decisive action. They find your anchored ships. What follows is not a battle, but an annihilation. The Battle of the Nile erases your fleet, bottlenecking the Mediterranean and leaving your army stranded, cut off from France, isolated in a foreign land. The principle of speed, so effective on land where you dictate the tempo, crashes against the hard reality of naval power and logistics. You cannot outrun the sea. You cannot outmaneuver a fleet that controls the waves. The insight dawns, stark and unforgiving. Velocity is a potent weapon, but it cannot overcome insurmountable logistical barriers or ignore domains where your opponent holds undisputed mastery. Your boundless ambition, unchecked, has led you into a venture where your core strengths, land warfare, rapid movement, psychological advantage, are negated, and speed becomes irrelevant against a fundamental obstacle: control of the sea. Ask yourself, was this expedition a stroke of Alexandrian genius or an act of breathtaking hubris? What would you have done, standing on the Egyptian shore, the smoke from Aboukir Bay a dark stain on the horizon? Knowing your path home is gone, this campaign teaches a bitter lesson. Understanding the limits of your speed and principle is as crucial, perhaps more crucial, than knowing how to apply them. Paris breathes the thick air of instability. The Directory, a ship taking on water, lurches from crisis to crisis, a carnival of corruption and ineffective governance. You are far from the sun-scorched sands of Egypt, where your strategic ambitions curdled into a logistical nightmare, your army stranded, isolated. But you didn't wait for the tides to turn or the impossible victory that wasn't coming. With characteristic, brutal decisiveness, you abandoned the men you led, recognizing not failure, but a perfectly timed political opening back home. You land in France, not as the general who left his army, but as the celebrated hero, the conqueror of Italy, the exotic adventurer returned from ancient lands. The public, weary of endless war, exhausted by the incompetence of their leaders, hungers for order, for strength. They see you as the answer. The acclaim is a currency you understand perfectly. You move with a new kind of speed now, political velocity. While your army faces isolation, you are weaving a complex, frantic web of alliances in Parisian salons, leveraging your battlefield fame to navigate the treacherous waters of power. The moment arrives, the coup of 18 Brumaire, November 9, 1799. It is meant to be smooth, legalish, a transfer of power engineered behind closed doors. Instead, it spills into raw, chaotic confrontation. You stride into the hall of the Council of 500, expecting acclaim or at least grudging respect. We are met with shouts, accusations of dictatorship, pure, visceral hostility. Deputies surge forward, jostling you, grabbing at your robes. For a single, terrifying moment, the legendary composure shatters. You are vulnerable, pale, stammering, escorted from the hall, shaken. It is a staggering glimpse behind the mask. The military genius falters when political persuasion fails, when the rules of engagement shift from cannons to committees. It is your younger brother, Lucien, president of the council, who saves the day with quick thinking and a theatrical appeal to the soldiers outside, claiming deputies tried to assassinate you. You recover your footing, regain control, and give the order. Troops, bayonets fixed, march into the hall, clearing it by force. The coup isn't elegant, it's clumsy, born of political miscalculation and saved by military might. But it is decisive. It is fast enough to succeed before your bewildered opponents can truly organize. The brutal insight of 18 Brumaire isn't just about military speed. It's about recognizing and seizing a political opportunity instantly, about applying decisive velocity to the corridors of power. You didn't wait for an invitation to rule. You created the moment through calculated return and ruthless action. Seizing power, whether political or personal influence, often requires this specific blend of bold timing and the willingness to act decisively when others hesitate, using whatever tools are available, even if it's brute force masking political awkwardness. Ask yourself, was this calculated genius or simply applying the only language you truly knew, command and force, to a political problem? What does the stumbled entrance into the council reveal about the man beneath the uniform? The clumsiness, the reliance on soldiers to clear a political chamber, shows that even Napoleon's speed could stumble outside the predictable battlefield, revealing a reliance on force when persuasion, the politician's true weapon, failed him. The dust of Marengo chokes the air on this stifling June day, 1800. You stand on the plains, the roar of cannon, a deafening percussion to the unfolding disaster. Months ago, you, Napoleon Bonaparte, now First Consul of France, launched another lightning strike, a gamble of audacious speed. You hauled cannons over the frozen peaks of the Great St. Bernard Pass, a feat of logistical will that defied mountains and winter itself. Your goal was simple, brutal. Surprise the Austrian army in Italy, reclaim the dominance lost while you were in Egypt. Your principle? Velocity, swiftness, the sudden, overwhelming hammer blow. But here, now, that hammer blow has shattered on Austrian resilience. Their counterattack is relentless, overwhelming. The French lines, stretched thin, are breaking, not bending, but snapping. Panic ripples through the ranks. You are here, riding among the troops, trying to stem the tide with your presence, your voice. But the momentum of defeat is a physical force. It drags men backward, turns order into chaos. Messengers, faces grim with despair, are already galloping towards Paris, carrying the news that will shock France. The First Consul's army is broken, the battle lost. Your vaunted speed, your strategic brilliance brought you here, to the brink of ruin, without the immediate, decisive victory you craved. It seems your own velocity has outrun fortune. Then, faintly at first, a sound carries on the wind, the distant thunder of guns. General Dissect, detached earlier on a separate mission, hears the symphony of chaos from afar. Not waiting for orders, trusting his ears and his battlefield instinct, he makes a lightning decision. He wheels his division, pushing them at punishing speed back towards the sound, towards the desperate fight. He arrives just as the retreat is curdling into a rout, just as defeat is becoming absolute. He surveys the carnage, the fleeing men, the pursuing Austrians. His assessment is brutally simple, immortalized in history. The battle is completely lost, but there is time to win another. With that impossible declaration, Dissect launches his men into a desperate charge. It's a fragile pivot point, a single division thrown into the maw of disaster. But it works. It buys moments. Louis Kellerman's cavalry sweeps in, catching the pursuing Austrians in the flank. Artillery, hastily repositioned, pours fire into the shaken enemy ranks. Dissect falls, struck down leading his men. But his sacrifice, his independent decision and speed has turned the tide. The lost battle is miraculously, inexplicably won. Marengo is not a testament to your speed, Napoleon, but to the timely, decisive speed of another. Ask yourself, does this moment underscore your genius in inspiring such loyalty, or the sheer, humbling power of luck? The takeaway is stark. Even supreme planning and unparalleled personal velocity can lead you to the precipice. Sometimes, salvation arrives not from your own actions, but from the courage and timely intervention of those around you, acting independently. Your greatest triumphs might be moments where fortune, embodied by a decisive subordinate, intervened, highlighting the fragile illusion of control when victory relies solely on personal speed and ambition. You see him there late into the night, the room thick with candlelight and the smell of ink. Not on a battlefield, but amidst a storm of paper. He has conquered, now he builds, and he builds with the same impossible velocity he applied to war. The chaos of the revolutionary years, a jumble of conflicting laws and fractured authority, is swept away not by an army, but by sheer, focused speed. You witness Napoleon applying his principle of velocity not just to breaking things, but to creating them. Documents pile high, not just military dispatches, but proposals for schools, financial regulations, drafts of laws. He doesn't just read, he devours. He doesn't just decide, he decrees, instantly. You see him dictating to 3, sometimes 4 secretaries simultaneously, his mind a whirlwind, darting from military strategy on the Rhine to the precise wording of a civil statute, then to the construction of a new canal or the curriculum for a lycée. This isn't mere busywork. It is the engine of reform, running at maximum RPM. The crowning achievement of this hyperspeed consolidation is the Civil Code, the Code Napoleon. Drafted and implemented with breathtaking speed, it's a monument to clarity and efficiency, sweeping away centuries of legal complexity in a few short years. It's a surprising detail for a man known for cannons. His most enduring conquest might well be a book of laws. He centralizes administration with blinding speed, establishes the Bank of France, reorganizes education, launches infrastructure projects. He works tirelessly, expecting the same unsustainable pace from everyone around him. Ministers collapse, aides are replaced, but the work continues, driven by his singular, relentless energy. This speed wasn't just about efficiency, it was strategic. He understood that a stable, centralized, efficient state was the bedrock necessary to support his military ambitions, to provide the men, money, and resources needed for endless campaigns. The velocity of consolidation solidified his gains, creating lasting institutions that would endure long after the empires fell. Ask yourself, is this admirable dedication to order and progress, or the ruthless, self-serving demand of a system built purely to fuel one man's ambition? It is the application of battlefield speed to construction. A powerful engine, yes, but one that burns through human fuel at an alarming rate, creating a system utterly dependent on his own impossible stamina. The takeaway is clear. Ambition must be channeled into building tangible systems, not just fleeting victories. But note the tragic irony. The very speed that built the foundation also created its greatest fragility, a reliance on a single, irreplaceable motor. You stand on the Pratzen Heights on December 2nd, 1805. The air bites with the cold of an Austrian winter morning. Below you, not mist, but a thick, pregnant fog blankets the landscape. It is the famous Sun of Austerlitz, not yet fully broken through the haze, but promising to illuminate a battlefield like no other. Across the valleys, stretched wide and confident, are the armies of Russia and Austria, the Third Coalition. They see the depleted French flank, the feigned weakness Napoleon has presented, and they take the bait, pulling their strength away from the crucial center to deliver what they believe will be the decisive blow. You feel the tension beside you, the coiled spring of an army waiting. But look at the emperor. He is not pacing, not shouting. He is a statue carved from granite and calculation, watching, waiting. His eyes, fixed on the enemy center, are the coldest things on this frozen field. The Allied line stretches thinner, their forces committed to the flanks, drawn by the mirage of easy victory. This is the critical moment. Napoleon gives the signal. Below the heights, where whole French corps were hidden from view by terrain and fog, the spring uncoils with explosive speed. It's not a gradual advance. It's a sudden, unstoppable surge. Like a perfectly aimed spear, the French thrust upward, directly into the now weakened heart of the Allied formation. The enemy command structure, caught utterly by surprise, shatters instantly. This isn't just fighting. It's a surgical strike, executed with brutal velocity. The battlefield transforms from a chess match into a demolition derby in moments. You watch as the Allied lines buckle, then break. The sheer momentum of the French assault, combined with the precision of its timing, is overwhelming. The battle dissolves into a rout. This is Napoleon's principle of war distilled to its purest form. Perfect intelligence informing a brilliant, deceptive plan, executed with flawless speed and concentrated force at the decisive point. The climax. The ice groans, then cracks. A scene of utter destruction unfolds. Men, horses, cannon, all swallowed by the freezing water. A horrific testament to the unstoppable momentum of Napoleon's victory. This wasn't just a battle won. It was a principle validated in blood and ice. Austerlitz becomes the defining example of velocity as an almost irresistible force when wielded by genius. It cements the belief that any problem, military or political, can be solved through concentrated power applied with maximum speed. Ask yourself, witnessing this, the sheer destructive brilliance, the perfect, terrible coordination, do you see a divinely gifted commander, or a man who has just been handed the most dangerous tool imaginable, the belief that nothing can stand in his way if he simply hits it hard and fast enough? The takeaway is clear, yet fraught with peril. Understanding when and where to apply concentrated force with maximum speed is the ultimate strategic skill. But Austerlitz whispered a lie, that this skill alone was invincible. The sun setting on this field of shattered ice and broken men cast long, dangerous shadows on the path ahead. December 2nd, 1804. The air inside the Cathedral of Notre Dame hangs heavy, thick with the perfume of incense and the weight of centuries. Sunlight streams through the high stained glass windows, illuminating dust motes dancing above velvet robes and gleaming gold. You stand among the hushed crowd, a witness to history about to be bent to one man's will. Pope Pius VII is here, robed in splendor, ready to perform the ancient rite, to place the symbol of divine right onto the brow of France's new leader. Every eye is fixed on Napoleon. But tradition, like so many old walls, is about to crumble. Napoleon doesn't kneel. He doesn't wait for the Pope to bestow legitimacy. In a swift, almost brutal motion that ripples through the assembled nobility and clergy like a shockwave, he reaches out. He takes the heavy, bejeweled crown directly from the pontiff's hands. There's a collective gasp, a silence that feels louder than any shout. Then, deliberately, with absolute self-possession, he raises the crown and places it firmly upon his own head. He crowns himself Emperor of the French. Next, with a gaze that seems to hold the entire future, he turns and places a smaller crown upon the head of his Empress, Josephine. This moment isn't mere arrogance. It's Napoleon's principle of speed and decisiveness made manifest in the ultimate act of status acquisition. He didn't seek validation. He seized authority by sheer force of will. It was a declaration. I owe this not to God, not to tradition, not even to the church, but to myself and the power I command. It was the velocity of status at its absolute peak. He reached the pinnacle of power faster than any outsider in French history, ascending from obscure artillery officer to emperor in just 15 years. The insight is stark. The pursuit of status, when driven by an internal clock set to maximum velocity and coupled with unshakable self-belief, can simply shatter traditional barriers and norms. But standing there, watching the crown settle, you can almost feel the tragic irony begin to curdle the victory. The crown, seized with such breathtaking speed and decisiveness, would be lost just as swiftly. The very rapidity of his ascent, while astonishing, meant his foundation lacked deep roots. He built an empire at breakneck pace, a structure brilliant in design, but perhaps too quickly assembled to withstand the inevitable storms. Ask yourself, was this act of self-coronation the ultimate display of strategic brilliance and self-reliance? Or the first fatal symptom of hubris? A man believing he could command legitimacy as easily as he commanded armies. He didn't wait for power to be given. He took it. But power taken so abruptly can also be taken away. From the blood-soaked fields of Europe, your gaze, the emperor's gaze, shifts. Trafalgar was a scar, a naval checkmate you could not ignore. Britain, the resilient island, remained untouchable across the waves. If you cannot sink her ships, you will starve her ports. The battlefield velocity, the principle of crushing, decisive force, applied with lightning speed, is now turned towards a vast, complex economic organism. You decree the continental system. A stroke of the pen forbids any nation under your sway from trading with Britain. It is a sweeping, absolute command, delivered with imperial authority and the expectation of immediate, crushing results. You imagine the docks of London lying empty, the warehouses silent, the proud nation brought to its knees by economic strangulation. You see the ports of Hamburg, Amsterdam, Naples, once bustling hubs, now lie eerily quiet. Ships, once the arteries of commerce, sit idle, their timbers groaning like the economies they once served. It is a dramatic scene, a demonstration of your absolute power reaching across the continent. But this is not a battlefield where regiments march and cannons roar. This is the slow, distributed resistance of necessity. Smuggling becomes an art form, a shadow economy thriving just beyond your reach. Goods slip through porous borders, defying the strictures of your decree. Nations like Portugal, whose economy is interwoven with Britain's, openly defy you, leading to costly military expeditions. Russia, feeling the economic pinch and resenting the infringement on its sovereignty, begins to chafe under the system's strain. You rage in your palaces. Ambassadors tremble as you demand harsher enforcement, more patrols, more rigidity. How can a mere decree, delivered with such clarity and backed by the might of your empire, fail to produce the swift collapse you envisioned? This reveals a crucial, painful insight. The velocity and centralized control that win battles cannot effectively fight a dispersed, decentralized economic force. You are attempting to apply a hammer blow to a fog. Economic activity finds ways around rigid controls, like water around a rock. It requires patience, adaptability, understanding of complex interdependencies, qualities antithetical to your core principle of decisive, comprehensive control enforced with speed and rigidity. Your system, designed to be a swift, decisive economic guillotine for Britain, becomes a slow, agonizing noose for your own allies and ultimately for your empire. The tragic irony is stark. The genius who mastered the rapid maneuver is defeated by the slow, persistent tide of human self-interest and economic necessity. He expects immediate surrender. Instead, he gets widespread evasion and growing resentment. Ask yourself, can brute force, no matter how powerful, ever truly control the invisible currents of commerce? His velocity breaks against the slow-grinding forces of economics and human self-interest, revealing the limits of even the most powerful will when faced with a problem that cannot be solved by decree or cavalry charge. It is a lesson etched not in victory, but in the quiet, persistent defiance of empty ports and smuggled goods. You are in the dusty, sun-baked villages of Spain. The air is thick with the smell of dry earth and suspicion. Napoleon, fresh from triumphs that reshaped the map of Europe, looks south. Confident, perhaps overly so, he sees Spain not as a nation with a fierce heart, but as another domino to fall swiftly into his grand design. His decision? Sweep in. Depose the Bourbons, install his brother Joseph Bonaparte on the throne. A quick campaign, he thinks, a swift application of the Grande Armée's irresistible force, just like against Austria or Prussia. Initially, his calculation seems correct. The main Spanish armies are defeated with familiar speed and tactical brilliance. Cities fall. Joseph is enthroned. The victory bulletins are sent back to Paris. But the war doesn't end. It mutates. It spreads like a slow, incurable disease through the capillaries of the land. You are a French soldier marching through a seemingly empty village. The silence is deafening, oppressive. Every window could conceal a sniper. Every shadow might hide an assassin. This is not a war of grand battles and clear front lines. It is 1,000 tiny, brutal skirmishes. The Spanish people, fiercely independent, deeply religious, rise up not as conventional armies, but as a nation possessed. This is guerrilla warfare, a term born from this conflict. Peasants, priests, bandits, everyone becomes a potential combatant. Roads are ambushed, supply trains vanish, wells are poisoned, soldiers found alone are brutally murdered. His armies are tied down, bled dry by constant harassment. Manpower that should be preparing for campaigns elsewhere is trapped in a seemingly endless cycle of pacification and retaliation. Napoleon's genius for concentrated, decisive force fails here. How do you deliver a knockout blow against an enemy that melts into the landscape? How do you win a war against a population that considers every lost life a martyr and every act of violence a sacred duty? This grinding conflict becomes the Spanish ulcer. It drains resources, time, and manpower. It's a constant, festering wound consuming the strength of the empire. It forces Napoleon to commit hundreds of thousands of his best troops year after year into a meat grinder with no clear victory condition. His principle of striking fast and hard against a defined enemy proves ineffective against this determined, dispersed popular resistance. It's a bitter irony. The master of velocity, the man who built his empire on speed and shock, is grounded down by slow, unyielding resistance. It's a stark lesson, underestimating the power of national will, the sheer human cost of occupation, attempting to impose your will with speed and force on a population determined to resist. That path inevitably leads to a costly, drawn-out failure. His velocity is ground down by slow, unyielding resistance. Ask yourself, did he see Spain merely as territory, failing to grasp the soul of its people? What would it feel like to be the emperor watching his finest legions vanish into this unforgiving land, not by a single decisive battle, but by 1,000 cuts? It's here, in the dust of Spain, that the limits of sheer military power against popular will begin to show. You are standing in the grand halls of the Tuileries Palace, the very air thick with unspoken grief and the heavy weight of imperial necessity. Outside, the empire you built is a whirlwind of rapid reform, restless armies, and territories conquered with astonishing speed. Inside, a different kind of battle unfolds, one of heart versus crown. Napoleon, the architect of this lightning-fast ascent, faces a cold, hard truth. The future requires more than victories. It requires continuity. It requires an heir. And here, in the heart of his power, the engine stalls. Josephine, his beloved, the empress who stood by him from the chaotic days of the Directory, cannot provide one. The same relentless, almost brutal logic that drove him to march armies across continents now turns inward, demanding a sacrifice few could fathom. You watch as the divorce unfolds, not as a personal tragedy, though it is profoundly that for both, but as a stark, public declaration that even love bows before the needs of dynasty. It is a clinical excision, performed with the characteristic speed and decisiveness that define his leadership. The speed of his rise is now the velocity of his pragmatism, slicing through the most intimate of bonds. The ink on the divorce papers is barely dry before the diplomatic engines roar to life. Napoleon, the parvenu emperor, seeks a bride from the ancient houses of Europe, not for affection, but for lineage, for political ballast. His eyes settle on Marie-Louise, daughter of the Austrian Emperor, Francis I, his recent nemesis. The arrangement is swift, almost jarringly so. The enemy of yesterday is the father-in-law of tomorrow. It is a political calculation so cold, so utterly devoid of personal sentiment, that it chills you. The same principle of rapid, overwhelming action that shattered armies now engineers a marriage, sacrificing deep personal connection on the altar of perceived dynastic security. It is breathtaking in its audacity, and heartbreaking in its consequence. This moment reveals a profound, perhaps terrifying, insight into the man. The relentless logic of his ambition extends not just to maps and armies, but to his very core relationships. The pursuit of permanence in a world built on speed demands the ultimate personal cost. What would you have done, standing in his boots with an empire's future seemingly hinging on this sacrifice? Can such rapid, cold pragmatism ever truly secure a legacy? Or does it merely build it upon a foundation of personal ruin? The speed of political calculation here doesn't just reshape Europe. It shatters a personal world, highlighting the stark, isolating nature of unchecked, all-consuming ambition. It's a chilling demonstration. When velocity dictates strategy, even love can become collateral damage. You stand now, not on a battlefield, but on the edge of a nightmare unfolding across limitless horizons. It is 1812, and Napoleon has assembled the Grande Armée, a behemoth of nearly 700,000 souls, the largest military force Europe has ever witnessed. You look out across the plains of Russia, stretching endlessly under an oppressive summer sky. The air shimmers with heat, and the dust kicked up by this colossal machine hangs like a suffocating shroud. Your ambition, once a sharpened blade, now feels strangely dull against this sheer, indifferent emptiness. The plan, crafted in moments of blinding confidence, was simple. Velocity. Hit hard, hit fast. Force a decisive battle near the border. Shattered Tsar Alexander I's will, and enforce the continental system with overwhelming speed and power. It is Napoleon's signature move, the swift, crushing blow that had brought emperors to their knees and redrawn maps. But the Russians refuse to play by the rules of Napoleonic warfare. They don't stand and fight. They retreat. They vanish into the vastness, drawing the Grande Armée deeper, mile after agonizing mile, torching their own villages, scorching the very earth that could feed your men and horses. You march and you march, the sun a relentless enemy overhead. Supply lines, the lifeblood of any army, stretch thin and break like fragile threads. Horses, thousands upon thousands, collapse and die, victims of starvation and exhaustion, their carcasses marking a trail of tragic inevitability. The enemy is a phantom, always just beyond reach, a frustrating, elusive taunt. This is not war as you have known it. This is a contest against geography itself, a battle against nothingness. Napoleon's principle of seeking a rapid, decisive confrontation, his very genius for speed, finds itself impotent. It's a master chess player whose opponent simply clears the board and walks away. His carefully honed velocity, capable of crushing conventional resistance, simply breaks against a strategy of strategic withdrawal and the insurmountable defense of sheer space. It is perhaps the ultimate tragic irony. The man who mastered speed is undone by slowness, by an enemy willing to trade all for time. Ask yourself, was this still the brilliance of a visionary leader adapting to an impossible challenge? Or was it the ultimate expression of hubris, the belief in an unstoppable momentum that blinded him to the fundamental limits of force when confronted with scales, geographical, logistical, or human will, that render speed utterly irrelevant? The decision to plunge into Russia was the zenith of that self-belief, the conviction that his force was insurmountable, and it was the direct path to catastrophe. You are among the ragged survivors, The biting wind tears at your rags, a relentless enemy colder than any Cossack blade. You stumble, not march, back through the endless white of the Russian winter, one frozen step after another. The Grande Armée, the glorious, elegant columns that swept across Europe like destiny itself, are gone. They have dissolved, vanished into a desperate, frozen horde, a trail of dying men and horses stretching into the horizon like a gruesome ribbon. Order? It disintegrated weeks ago, melting away like the summer snows you dreamed of, replaced by a primal, horrifying scramble for survival. The nadir of this nightmare unfolds before you at the Berezina River. The scene is pure, unadulterated chaos. Makeshift bridges groan under the weight of thousands. Not soldiers anymore, but frantic, terrified souls clawing for the other side. The cold bites deep, turning hands blue, faces gray. Enemy cannon fire screams overhead, tearing through the panicked ranks, adding gruesome punctuation to the symphony of misery. The river itself, a churning mix of ice and frigid water, swallows the fallen. Comrades you shared rations with just days ago are now trampled underfoot in the crushing panic, their desperate cries lost in the roar of the river and the crack of ice. Horses, once the pride of the cavalry, collapse and die, leaving their riders to freeze or stumble onward as helpless infantry. This horrifying speed of collapse is the cruelest irony. The very velocity that built the empire, that propelled you from victory to victory, now fuels its own undoing, accelerating the army's disintegration with terrifying efficiency. The insight is brutal, stark, and undeniable. The momentum of a rapid advance, when reversed, becomes the devastating velocity of a catastrophic retreat. The faster you went forward, without securing your lines, without building for endurance, the faster you fall apart when the momentum breaks. Your army, built for speed, shock, and conquest, is utterly unsuited for survival against such elemental forces. It was a finely tuned racing machine, not a tank. The principle that delivered so many stunning victories now delivers the ultimate, devastating defeat. This army, designed for relentless offense, proves dangerously brittle when forced into a defensive survival situation. The sheer speed of the unraveling mirrors the speed of the initial advance, a tragic, perfectly symmetrical dance towards oblivion. Ask yourself, standing on the banks of the Berezina, watching the world dissolve in ice and blood, was this collapse inevitable the moment the advance stalled, or could a system built for resilience have weathered the storm? You are on a small island, Elba. The grand stage of Europe feels impossibly distant now, replaced by rocky shores and the quiet murmur of exile. Your ambition, once a roaring inferno, is banked embers, but not extinguished. You watch the news arriving from the continent, the restored Bourbons proving every bit as tone-deaf and unpopular as you predicted, the victors at Vienna already carving up the spoils and bickering amongst themselves, like vultures over a carcass. It rankles. It breeds a dangerous kind of patience, a coiled readiness. The world believes the eagle is caged. They underestimate the sheer force of will that fuels you, even in defeat. You plot, you scheme, you wait for the perfect, impossible moment. And then it arrives. News of discontent, of soldiers restless under old flags, of a populace yearning for the stability and glory they knew under your rule. It is a narrow window, perhaps your last. With a handful of loyal guards and a audacity that borders on madness, you slip away from Elba. The escape itself is a feat of pure nerve and timing, a whisper on the wind that quickly becomes a gale. You land in France, a trespasser on the soil you once commanded. The march to Paris begins, not with an army, but with a legend. This is the ultimate gamble on your own mystique, a final, desperate application of your core principle. Overwhelming speed fueled by unwavering belief. You are betting everything on the loyalty of your veterans and the deep, bitter disappointment with the old regime's return. Soldiers sent to intercept you find their orders dissolving in the face of your presence. They were meant to capture you. Instead, they join you. Their cheers of Vive l'Empereur, a thunderclap echoing your past triumphs across the fields you march through. The crucial moment, the scene that defines this improbable surge, unfolds at Laffrey. The 5th Line Regiment stands blocking your path, their muskets leveled. It is you, alone, walking towards them. You peel open your famous gray coat, expose your chest, and utter words that pierce the cold air and centuries. Soldiers, if there is one among you who wishes to kill his emperor, here I am. Ask yourself, what would you have done, standing in their boots, facing the man who defined their generation? It is not just courage. It is a profound, almost supernatural psychological velocity, a current of loyalty and memory rushing back. Their response is instantaneous, overwhelming, a roar of Vive l'Empereur as they break ranks to join you. This moment is the dying gasp of the principle that propelled you from obscurity, the power of momentum, the magnetism of past success, the ability to inspire fervent loyalty through sheer presence and legend. It shows that the legend you built, the unwavering loyalty you inspired through years of shared hardship and triumph, can indeed be a potent force, capable of achieving the seemingly impossible. But even this extraordinary sprint, built on the potent emotional memory of past speed and success, is fundamentally unsustainable in a Europe that has learned to unite against you. It is an echo of past glory, loud and thrilling, but ultimately incapable of overcoming the changed reality of the continent you once ruled. The world has moved on, and this miraculous surge is but a temporary rewind, a final, glorious flicker before the inevitable. You stand on the soggy ground of Waterloo, June 18, 1815. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and the low, anxious hum of thousands of men waiting. This is it, the final act in a drama that has spanned 2 decades and reshaped a continent. Before you is Wellington, his British and Allied forces arrayed with stubborn resolve along the ridge. To the flank, Blücher and his Prussians are marching, faster than expected, relentlessly towards this field. The conditions themselves conspire against you. The torrential rain of the previous night has turned the ground into a quagmire. Your planned early attack, your signature move of striking before the enemy is fully ready, is impossible. The mud will swallow your cannonballs, slow your infantry, cripple the speed of your cavalry charge. You are robbed of crucial early velocity, the very essence of your strategic genius. Perhaps your health, too, is failing. The legendary energy that could command an army while writing letters and dictating policy is, some say, waning. The spark feels dimmer today. Yet, you attempt your familiar symphony of war. Concentrated assaults are launched, hammering against the British lines. The French columns surge forward, expecting the enemy to break, to shatter under the focused pressure. but the British squares hold firm, absorbing the shock like granite outcrops in a storm. Time and again, your principle of concentrated force is met with unwavering discipline and resilience. Then, the horizon changes. The dark columns of Prussians, Blücher's vengeful veterans, appear. Their speed, underestimated, is devastatingly timely. They arrive not as a distant threat, but as a concrete, rapidly deploying force on your flank, just as the main battle hangs in the balance. Your calculations were off. Their velocity was sufficient, and yours was insufficient relative to their march rate. The dramatic scene unfolds as the day wanes. The final charge of the Imperial Guard. The elite of your army, the men who have never known defeat under your direct command, march in columns up the gentle slope towards the waiting British lines. Silhouetted against the smoke-filled, darkening sky, they are the embodiment of your will, your ambition, your reliance on that decisive, concentrated blow. But they are met with devastating volley fire, point-blank cannonade, and finally, the relentless pressure of the British Guards' bayonets. The cry, whether real or myth, echoes. The Guard dies but does not surrender. They are repulsed, broken. This is the moment your principle of decisive, concentrated force, delivered with speed, definitively fails. You waited too long to attack, losing precious hours in the mud. You detached forces unnecessarily earlier in the campaign. You underestimated your opponent's resolve, Wellington's tenacity, the sheer fury and speed of the Prussian arrival. The crushing insight arrives with the setting sun. Your velocity is meaningless if your opponent moves faster, when it matters, or holds firmer than you can push at the critical juncture. Waterloo is the ultimate tragic demonstration that relying on past success and your signature move can blind you to changing circumstances. A determined enemy who has learned your tricks and the critical importance of relative speed and timing. Even the master of velocity can be defeated when his speed falters and his opponent's is sufficient. Ask yourself, was this tactical failure or the culmination of a hubris that believed his own legend was faster than reality? You stand on the desolate cliffs of St. Helena. The wind is a constant, mournful companion, whipping around Longwood House, the final cage. You are a prisoner now, stripped bare. No title, no army, no empire. Just the vast, indifferent ocean, stretching to every horizon, an impassable blue wall, mocking the man who once commanded the movement of millions. The relentless velocity that defined your life, the forced marches, the lightning campaigns, the dizzying ascent to power, is now just a memory, a phantom limb aching with inactivity. Your only battles fought on paper, scribbling furiously, shaping a legend you hope will outlive the exile. You pore over maps of forgotten campaigns, replaying victories, dissecting defeats. But the reflection is often clouded. Failures are attributed to treacherous marshals, unforeseen storms, or the sheer capriciousness of fate. Rarely, if ever, do you confront the possibility that the inherent dangers lay not in external forces, but in the very principle that drove you, the relentless pursuit of speed, control, and decisive victory at any cost. It was this breakneck pace that prevented the deep, tedious work of consolidating power, building broad consensus, securing the ground beneath your rapidly expanding dominion. You built the palace in weeks, but neglected the foundations for years. The stark contrast between the master of movement and the man confined by miles of water hammers home a brutal truth. Greatness achieved through unsustainable speed and unchecked self-belief breeds collapse, not lasting empire. Your velocity allowed you to reach unimaginable heights with breathtaking speed, pulling nations into your orbit with dazzling force. Yet this same haste prevented you from laying the stable, broadly supported foundations necessary for your achievements to endure. It is a profound, tragic irony. The speed that built the empire was the same force that ensured its eventual undoing. History breathes down your neck on this remote rock, whispering the lesson. You once declared, "Impossible is a word to be found only in the dictionary of fools." But perhaps the greatest folly wasn't believing you could conquer the impossible, but believing that speed and will alone could render anything truly possible, bypassing the slow, essential work of building deep. This echoes even now, doesn't it? In the modern world, obsessed with disruption, instant results, and scaling fast at all costs. Are we too doomed to repeat this pattern? Building rapidly, without securing the ground, invites collapse. The echoes of Napoleon's rise and fall resonate in boardrooms, political arenas, and personal ambitions seeking overnight success. The wisdom gained from this final, enforced pause, from this island prison, is clear. True legacy isn't measured by the speed of the ascent, but by the depth of the foundations laid and the difficult wisdom earned from both triumph and failure. In the end, the walls that defeated him weren't made of stone or enemy soldiers. They were built by the unsustainable velocity of his own ambition.